I'm Kruglikova, and I am the director of the Division of Conference Management. Who am I in my private life is a different question. I'm from California. My mother is German, my father is American. I grew up wanting to be just like my dad. I wanted to be a chemist. And I went through university, undergraduate, graduate school. I got chemistry degrees, and what I discovered is even though I love science, I didn't want to do science. So at that point I went and got an MBA. Worked in manufacturing for a couple of years for a major pharma firm. And then I found out about the U.S. Foreign Service. So I ended up becoming a diplomat. I was in the U.S. Foreign Service from 1991 to 2007. I lived in a variety of places. I was in 2 posts in Germany. I was in New Delhi, India, where I did science work. I was in St. Petersburg, Russia, where I did general administrative work. From there I went back to Washington, and then I ended up eventually at the university, this is embarrassing, I don't remember. Anyway, I ended up here in Geneva at the U.S. Mission. I worked in the U.S. Mission for 4 years doing finance, and I also worked on Geneva Group, multilateral affairs. Then I went to the U.S. Embassy in Tallinn, Estonia. At that point, however, my husband stayed here, which is the case for many people who are in the UN. We have a complicated family situation. And I said, okay, I'm not going to be interested in moving around all the time. I need to be a little more stable. I want to be with my husband. So I ended up applying for positions at the UN. And I was extremely fortunate. I got a position in the Division of Conference Management. I was initially an admin officer, P3, in the executive office. I was in the executive office. I eventually was able to move on to become the executive officer. After that, I became chief of the production and support service, which is where we have printing and distribution and some IT. And then from there, I moved on to the director. I became the director in May. So I have 2 kids. I have 2 boys, one of whom is studying computer science. The other one's still in high school. That's an excellent question. So the name director kind of says it all. So I direct a really great team of people. We have about 570 positions in the division, and we provide support for conferences here at the Palais des Nations. So we have people who are interpreters, people who are translators, people who are desktop publishers. We have people who are printers, people who distribute documents. We have IT people, and we have people who are involved with planning and coordination and working with clients. So it's a big group. I'm very fortunate that there's a lot of talented people with a lot of incredible expertise and enthusiasm. But our role is really to make it so that when member states and civil society come together in a conference room like this one, that they are able to have the best possible communication, that they are able to have the information they need in formats that they can access it. So for instance, reports, whether it's a country report or report from Secretariat, those are translated into 6 languages so that people as much as possible can read the information in their own language. When they're in the meeting room, when they're speaking with each other, they're interpreted. So again, they can speak in their own language in which they're most comfortable. Much like I can speak in English, it's my native language, I'm much more comfortable. If we did this in French or Russian or German, it would be a completely different experience. People speak in the language they're most comfortable. Others can hear in the language with which they're most comfortable. And this is all about making the multilateral process as seamless as possible. And we have a great team that do that every day. So that's my role as director of the division. I also have 2 very important roles here at UNOG. One of them is I'm the UNOG focal point for disability inclusion, and I chair UNOG's Disability Inclusion Action Team. And the other is I'm the UNOG focal point for multilingualism. And you can see that there's a natural synergy between my role as director and my role with doing multilingualism, because of course the division is all about languages, and multilingualism is all about supporting the possibility of people to work in multiple languages. Well, this is, we've been through some really difficult times recently. The COVID situation is still going on. We had the liquidity crisis back, which really was a big thing in March of 2020. COVID came on at the same time. There's a huge technological shift out in the world, and COVID has really accelerated that. So one of the things we need to do is figure out how are we going to work together how are we going to take advantage of these technologies in ways that make us more effective, support our mission to improve multilateral communication and cooperation, while still preserving the benefits that we have from working closely together as a team. So there's the issue about returning to the office. How are we going to manage that? And then what is conferencing going to look like in the post-COVID world? So we're rebooting something that was done in 2018-19 that my predecessor put together called Conferencing Today and Tomorrow. So we're doing a new phase of that. We've already established a project manager. We'll be reaching out to our stakeholders, so people organizing conferences, member states, civil society, etc., to understand what did they like, what worked well for them in the COVID environment, and what was problematic, what did they miss. Based on the findings of this study, we're going to put together some projects to figure out what makes sense, what could we move forward. In the very immediate future, we're doing a lot of work with the RSI platforms, that's remote simultaneous interpretation. It's great that people can participate from around the world, but as it turns out, it's not all done automatically, and we have colleagues who sit there with their ear shells listening to bad sound from around the world. And even if you're in any kind of meeting without interpretation, you know how frustrating it is when you listen to bad sound. So we're trying to figure out how can we continue to facilitate remote participation that's so important for business continuity without having the staff wind up paying the price for that. I do think that the technology is moving really fast, that 2 or 3, maybe 5 years from now, this will be much less of an issue. That remains to see. But for me, the burning issue for the division is, what did COVID mean to us? How are we going to build on that? Take the lessons learned. How can we change? And we have another opportunity. So COVID is a driver, right? But we also have seen that when you look at the staff succession planning, when you see how many people are going to retire by 2030, and that will include me, this is really a chance to review and adjust our staff profile. What is the sorts of work that we need? Now the UN has this new UN data strategy saying we need data, we need information, we want data-driven decision making. So this is one thing we're going to look at, how we can embed more closely into the division. So I can't say exactly where we're going to be, but for me it's very important that we take advantage of the opportunities that have come up and really say, all right, what can we do differently? Because we're not going to go back to what we did before. Even if we want to, and it was comfortable for a lot of people, it's not, the world isn't going to be the same. How it's going to be, we'll wait to see. It's starting to evolve, but we need to begin having these discussions now. So that's why we're putting together this Conferencing Today and Tomorrow Part 2 study. So my priorities, and I'm really new in this job. I started in May, but I have been with the division since 2007, so I've seen a fair amount of the challenges and such. I think most important is how we work with our partners and with our colleagues. So for instance, DGACM, under the Undersecretary General in New York, he sets the budget and the policy for conference services. We are part of his staffing table. We are part of his budget. So it's very important that this division work very closely with our counterparts and colleagues in New York. That said, our operational reality is here in Geneva. We operationally are under the Director General. So it's very important, I believe, in my role to make sure that there's proper communication flow between both sides. There's a lot of times when the USG will be speaking to member states in New York. There's times when the Director General here is speaking to member states in Geneva. We need to make sure that that information is properly concorded, that we have a consistent message and that both sides understand what the priorities are, so we can speak with one voice, one UN. So this is one priority. It's also important to be building partnerships. What we've seen with COVID is how crucial it is that we are closely working with our colleagues in DOA who provide services. That's people in audiovisual, people in IT, colleagues in UNIS that provide webcasting. So when you're a delegate, you walk through those doors and you sit in the chair, you see one UN, one CERT conference. But there's many different people making that happen. So it's very important for me that we are working closely together. And I sit in a working group every Wednesday with people doing that, just to make sure that we progress as much and as well as possible on hybrid conferencing. In that context, also working with the Strategic Heritage Plan. It's very important, for instance, that the renovation work that's being done in conferences provides the best and most appropriate technology, especially in the context of business continuity. COVID has come, it will go, but there will be something else. So we need to be in a position to provide business continuity, whether it's through remote participation or elsewhere. So I'm working very closely with SHP to make sure that the post-SHP conferencing environment is what we need to have it be.